Thank you, Director Ash, for being here today, and thank you, committee members. This is a joint hearing, as I said, of Interior and the Administrative Rules Subcommittees of the Oversight Committee. And it's also the second part of the hearing examining barriers to species recovery under the Endangered Species Act. Yesterday, we heard from panelists and members of the Interior Subcommittee regarding the challenges facing species recovery efforts. And we heard good ideas from both sides of the aisle about the challenges with getting species recovered and off the endangered list. We heard a lot about litigation and rigid statutory deadlines that cause problems for both the Fish and Wildlife Service and local conservation planning. Not just dollars, but in personnel and man-hours. We also heard about state and local efforts to conserve species and prevent listings. I hope the Fish and Wildlife Service, the rest of the administration, and our colleagues in Congress will be able to work together to improve the Endangered Species Act. It has not been reauthorized in over 25 years. Director Ash, I know you've had a busy week, appearing first before the Natural Resources Committee on Tuesday to discuss critical habitat rules, and then here today, as well as committees I probably don't even know about. I appreciated hearing you say a couple days ago that the gray wolf in Wyoming and the Great Lakes is recovered. You've said that on numerous occasions. We appreciate your science and acknowledgement of that, even though removing it from the endangered species list has been blocked by seamless, endless litigation. It is an example of one of the frustrations that members of Congress, people who conserve species on the ground in the states, and the service are having with this endless litigation. There was one of the people who testified yesterday who brought in a chart of the history of litigation on the gray wolf, how many times the service has recommended delisting, proposed rules for delisting, and how many times environmental litigation, that industry has chosen to go to a non-knowledgeable judge and get it back on the list. So hopefully we can discuss some other species today and other areas where the ESA and this administration's implementation of the ESA can be approved for the 21st century. I'm hoping that Congresswoman Plaskett may have some thoughts on the endangered corals that she testified about yesterday, at least in her statements, and the frustrations they're having in the Virgin Islands with this subject. So what we see, quite frankly, is that people in their communities who now have an environmental ethic embedded in their regulatory regimes, in their people's hearts, and in the manner in which their communities conduct business, has not been recognized, and the ESA doesn't keep up with it. We seem to have an environmental litigation industry that is protecting its own status by keeping the ESA back on a 21st century statutory and regulatory trajectory. The old command and control, the federal government knows best. But that is not the case anymore with regard to endangered species. Expertise lies in our communities, and we should be taking advantage of it as we advance the Endangered Species Act to a 21st century model that actually will recover species. I was disappointed to see that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service revised the proposed rule for the process to consider listing petitions. I had previously complimented the proposed rule because it gave states a larger involvement in the process and improved the quality and accuracy of the species information being submitted to the Fish and Wildlife Service. It would have, under its proposed implementation, improved the service's ability to more effectively manage the petitions and hopefully focus more on science instead of unproductive litigation. Unfortunately, when the rule was reported out a couple days ago, that provision was weakened. And it looks like to me that groups involved in the environmental litigation industry who are trying to protect their own turf may have had influence over the end result of that, because they're making a business out of suing you over petitions. And catering to litigation-focused organizations isn't going to get us anywhere. They refuse to entertain ESA changes whatsoever because they have a very lucrative business model, and it's working for them, and they don't want to surrender to people who are really more concerned about recovering species on the ground. That said, I hope we can have a rational discussion today to find common ground on what should be our common goal of an Endangered Species Act that serves both species and the people of the 21st century. Director Ash, thanks again for joining us today, and I look forward to our discussion. I would now like to recognize Mr. Cartwright for an opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And